Hi guys, welcome to this new class for art103. So today we're going to look at some photographs and a few images for films, and we're going to try to analyze them and using pretty much everything that we've been talking so far. It's going to help us, to put in practice a little bit all the concepts and example that we shared in the few first lessons. So some are going to be black and white, some are going to be colors. And I wanted to try to start with this one because this one is really a classic example of how to use the main concept that we've been talking about so far. So obviously in this image, the composition is following the rule of third, and we can verify that if I crop the image and I bring the rule of third here, we can have like the lines here, remember when I showed you that in the first few lessons. And obviously the face of this man, which is the man who is the main character, is right on this center of interest. And if you look how the rest is being composed, it's absolutely, it's really nice, because if you look at all the rectangles one by one, first of all, you have a few rectangles where you're not going to have much like this one. So if you take the top right, you only have like defocus 3 and these columns here, the column itself being in the third of this rectangle. This one is encapsulate one of the main character, the lady looking at him directly. If you look at the whole picture, she's pretty much the only one when you really see the eyes looking in the direction of the man. And this is also composed, just this square, this rectangle is also composed on the third, because her face is also on one of the thirds. So naturally you're gonna see that you have like three faces in diagonal, a little bit one here that you can't see completely, and these two that are cut, they're not looking in that direction. This one is looking outside of the frame to like open a little bit, and this one is looking down crying. Obviously this is a funeral scene. Then this the rectangle here has the eyes, and the eyes really in the bottom left corner of this rectangle, opening the view outside. And again, you have like three nice type of backgrounds, like very bright white one in the shadow and defocus one. So it behave a little bit like a flag, like something where you also draw some lines in here. The rectangle in the middle is the one where you see the tears, which obviously is a main asset of explaining what's going on in this image. And the rest is kind of not taking too much of your attention, to make sure that you're not going to focus too much of them. So one of the faces cut in half, the other two are either pretty defocused or not looking in the direction. This one, we are losing the eyes, so we just are basically assisting with them to the scene. This one is all about the accordion, so the music, because he's obviously playing the music. This one has in the corner another face, so just one face, which creates a little bit of interest in here. And this one is just going to be the arm and a little bit of line connecting to the angle. So a very interesting composition here. Obviously, by putting his face on the top left point of interest, which is here, it creates a lot of space in front of him to look outside. So it's like, his mind is going outside, probably trying to remember the person who passed away. The white create another frame. So we have the example of having a frame in the frame. So you could basically see that as just a portrait. So it's not a portrait, but it also have the feel of a portrait, obviously, because of this negative space created around his face. So or the white wall behind, or columns behind him with no details at all, so you don't need to focus on it at all. It's just putting him in front again, really foreground, really the most important subjects here. Few lines which are not straight, which also are quite interesting to explain that the situation is not settled. This is a funeral, so obviously people are a bit moved. So by having lines like this one, not straight, it also accentuates that idea. So if you look, you actually don't have any pure verticals, all the line are actually pointing a little bit down, you know, in a vanishing point. So that's quite interesting to note. The fact that he's playing the accordion also here is quite nice because he's going to create some other lines in that direction. So he's going to add a little bit to the dynamic of the image and actually going to point on the right hand side, which is also where he's looking. So it adds to this idea of really thinking about the person who passed away, and that is a nice touch, so lots of space, not too much details behind him, I mean not detail at all, to reframe the frame around his face. And a nice use of depth of field as well, because obviously you're losing quite easily all this section here of the image, because again it fades into memories and sorrow. People are sad, obviously. There are a lot of people are looking down. You have one here, two. This one is cut, this one is cut, and then we lose this face. We kind of don't have the eyes. We lose this face. We don't really have the eyes, and this one is only here. So compared to the number of people that you actually have in this image, you cannot put your attention of many of them. Anything that happen is actually happening between these two people and a little bit between her here. So you have two people pointing in the direction of the main character and him reflecting that and going outside, probably to reach the person who passed away and disappeared. So that's a very good photograph, and as you can see, we can talk about the composition, and there is a purpose for that. It's been created in that way because there was a story to tell, and that is what composition and art is. And everything I'm trying to explain in this Art 102 class is about telling a story by using some tools, which I try to explain. So let's close this one for now, and let's have a look at this one. So this image is also quite a famous one, and I really like this photo because again, it really follows very nice rules. So first of all, the focal length used for these pictures creates this massive hand, because obviously you have a lot of distortion. It's probably like 28 or something like that, and you can see that this hand is obviously too big. So the effect that is creating, doubled by these lines on the table, is that straight away you start to come from the foreground and you go in the distance. So if you had used like a longer lens, you would not have had this massive hand and deformation. That would have been more flat. So the idea is not to be flat. The idea is really to go from the foreground to the background. So again, this man is not giving us our eyes, but probably looking to the direction of his eyes. So that creates a first triangle here, which is quite interesting because he's the main character. So in a way, he's calm, he stays there, nothing really happens. He's just looking at his lighter, probably having a cigarette or something, and he's waiting at this table. It's calm. You have a nice triangle here, which, is a bit of a symbol of a peace and something balanced. So that is nice. But also, you actually can travel a bit more. And if you keep going alongside this arm, then you reach this line here. And this line is the line from the bed. And all these lines actually would also put you in the direction of the arm and then this section here. And now you're like, yeah, but in this section, we're not there. Yeah, but that's why you're going to have these lines on the bed. If you had lines in that direction, that would have been a bit different. But now you have bed with this line here. So your eye can travel again and come back to the kid on the bed. So if I recap, we're here, we reach there, and then when we're here, we follow these lines and we reach the head. Or if we don't, we follow this one, the black, and we reach the kid again. So whatever we do, we start probably by looking at this hand, probably this section, because that is the most visible and the bigger one. And then very quickly, we see this man, we stay a little bit on this man, and then you move and you go to the kid. The kid is quite interesting because first of all, in terms of colors, you have the use of the complementaries between this kind of blue and this kind of pink. You remember when I've said that desaturation was a good way to mix things together, where we have complementaries, it's just that they are not very saturated, but they are colors that works well together. So now we are reaching this kid here, and the kid is clearly having this position here. So, you know, like he's sitting like this, like with the square angle. So you're going to start, if you start with the head because your eye travel from here, then you're going to follow the body and then you're going to move to the leg. So this position is also inviting your eye to move from the bed to the foot. So far, that's how you probably discovered this image. Looking at this hand or this face, turning a little bit alongside this triangle made by this, and then you move backwards and in the background, and you see this little boy or little girl, and you're gonna follow the leg to the foot, and the foot naturally is gonna connect to that point, which is we're gonna keep rotating around this circle, but because our eye went from the bottom to the top, we're probably gonna keep going, and we're gonna reach these horns. And then we're going to follow that. So these horns is going to invite us to discover this whole section of the image and be like, oh, well, that's interesting. What is that? And then you're going to follow this, and then you're going to reach this small element, which is probably what you're going to see last. And then, because you need to have a way to go back, the photographer included this line made of a window that could have been kept outside, but because you have this line here, it's going to help you to go back to this section, which naturally going to lead to the hand. So if you look at how this image has been composed and how your eyes travel when you are trying to look at them, it does boom. Then you're like, I'm going to look at this a little bit, and then you're going to escape. You're going to reach this point. Then you're going to move here. You're going to look a little bit in this section to the kid. Then you're going to reach that. You're probably going to stay a little bit because of this circle shape here. Then you're going to follow this line. You're going to reach this element. Then you're going to escape from this element, and you're going to reach this line, which obviously points towards the bottom. And then this volume here, black, is going to let you travel here. And then you're going to reach the hand again because the hand is brighter than the sofa. So you're going to see it again. And then that's how you're going to look at the image. Another thing which is quite interesting in this image is the use of the curves. You have a good mixture of lines and curves because you have a good curve here with the table, curve here, and then here on the table you have straight line. And if you look around, actually the bed is line, 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 but curve because of the deformation, and curve and line and line and line here in a way, and a circle. So you and then the wall has some straight lines. So you really have a little game here between what's straight lines and what is more curves and circles. So again, it's a nice way to create a bit of contrast in an image. So quite interesting to have a look at this and explain that. So color-wise, that is interesting. Between the girl, the bed, and the wall, he is a little bit outside, like he's not really participating to everything. He's more related color-wise to that, if you look at it. So we might think that, you know, he might be like a hunter. He might like to go for, you know, hunt or something, and, you know, he got that. We don't know, but that clearly the color of the shirt is matching the sort of colors that you have in these horns, so that link them together way more than with the girl or the bed. The girl and the bed are really walking together, or the boy are walking together with this wall, which has a very interesting color. And this color palette is doing one thing where this is a little bit different. So we have another thing going on between the man and the horns here. So that's it for this image. I think it's it's a good one to look at and to focus on a bit, because it brings a lot of interesting discussion to understand how the eye is moving and is traveling alongside these different lines and curves. And as I explained before, it's all about how to move inside an image, because if you know how to make the spectator looking at everything, then you can put the details that you want, and then you're going to be able to tell the story that you want to tell. So it's really important to really understand how you use the composition and how you use these lines to drive the eye to the place that you want the spectator to look at. That's for this one. Let's have a look at Keith Richards. So picture from Keith Richards with a guitar, obviously, because he's got so many. So this photo is nice. It's a picture from a photo from Annie Leibovitz, and as usual, you have a lot of details. So this time it's more about, not so much about the lines itself, it's more about the details that you have. Obviously, she's telling the story of the guitarist of the Rolling Stone here, Keith Richards, and the choice of the colors, the choice of the tones from the shirt to the place is really interesting. You have a lot of details. It feels untidy in a way, or staged, but you've got everything. First of all, he's got this very lovely guitar, Gibson, in his hand, dark black, and he's actually also wearing quite dark colors with this leather jacket, so you don't have a lot of contrast here. And if you look at all the color palette, actually is very monochromatic. So we are in a monochromatic palette here, of this sort of sandy, desaturated type of tone. For the walls and the sofa, it's very flat and not very contrasty. For the shirt and his face and the headbands, you have a lot of contrast this time. So there is this idea of, the zebra is really good. This is matching the color of the guitar, because this Gibson is black and white. Obviously, you have a piece of cloth here, and then you have some elements like a skull here. We know that he's wearing like the ring with a skull, so it's been placed here probably as an answer to that. A few rings, a few jewel and stuff, and then these eyes looking again outside of the frame. And again, if I was cropping nearly his face straight onto this point, which is one of the rule of third point, you can notice that the guitar itself is almost following the line of the third as well. So obviously, you don't want to be too strict and absolutely following the rules, but you can tell that here the idea of the composition is to put the guitar and the fretboard and the neck on this line here, and to put his face on this point here, obviously, and let him looking outside of the frame. You can tell that outside of this line here, which is the third bit, you don't have him anymore. Like, he's completely contained in the guitar in this first two third of the image, and the last one is just give him some space. We are exactly in the same configuration that the first image that we looked at, where we actually leave a little bit of space empty to let the look, see what's beyond the frame. We really want him to be in his thoughts. Maybe he's composing, maybe he's remembering something, but he's clearly thinking about something at the moment. And if you were, framed differently, if you had put him, for example, like that would not have had the same effect, because obviously you would not have had the space to go, and then you would have this empty space here, and you would think, why do we have the space there? Because nothing interesting is happening here, actually. So no, you open where you want him to look. Obviously, he's looking outside of the frame in that direction, so you're going to leave it open. He's alone. He's in his thoughts. It's a very intimate moment, which is also probably why you have a chair here with no one, where on the first image that we looked at, the funeral, you had this main character, but he was not alone. It was a shared moment with the other people. So you had other people sitting around him. Here he is alone and he's in thoughts. So you're going to insist on that by letting the chair empty. 1 cup of tea, because again, he's alone. A bit of, water and probably the rest of the tea. So it means that he's probably be sitting here and move there. So that might be when he actually just picked his guitar and starting to play. So you see, we are telling a lot of story by just having a bit of a play with what's in the frame, because we know that everything has been put in place for a purpose. So it's all about understanding the purpose. Like the magnifying glass, the book, so it needs some help maybe to see properly. So again, that's quite interesting. And in terms of colors and contrasts, yes, the black and white of the shirt with the black and white of the headband, walking with the black and white of the skull here, and the skull here, which is also on the ring that he's wearing here. All of that, of course, being the same color than the guitar that he's using. If you had been playing his yellow Telecaster on this picture, that would not have had the same signification or the same impact visually. So obviously everything is put together for a purpose. And then you have, interestingly, this box for the guitar, which is put in a very interesting position, because if you look at the lines that we have in the frame, so you're going to have some verticals here, obviously, with the door and the wall, and the few lines that you have are actually going in the other direction. This one, you have one here, you have a parallel here, and then you have this one, and they are all going there. And that is another point which is really interesting, because if I go back to my crop, again, we're relatively close to this, and we are on the third. So it's not magical. Obviously, the intention is to really create like a composition where visually your eye is going to be dragged from this point to this point here, and then you're going to follow this line, which is also on the third, and then this line, which is also on the third. So this box has been placed in this specific position for this line here and this line here to point to this point here. So now you can see how she composed the image. And even here, these lines that are not horizontal are actually, are actually going to point towards his face. That's it. So it's not, again, it's not science. The idea is not to be absolutely perfect in all of that, but as you can tell, you really have a purpose here, and clearly it's been put in this way to achieve this very beautiful composition. So we are going to look at his face, because everything is moving toward his face. He's isolated in 2/3 of the image, and the rest is just empty to give him the space to think about what he's thinking. It's also quite interesting that he's looking at the top. He's not looking horizontally. He's not looking, for example, here following this line. No, he's going to look up, which means that he's escaping his own composition here. And that is how, and that's the same for the first image. By escaping the composition, this is how you're going to start to give the impression to actually be trying to, evade yourself and go somewhere else and, be in your thoughts. So that's it for Keith Richard. If we take Barry Lyndon is, we spoke about Barry Lyndon before, is a very interesting movie, because everything has been lit naturally, so that then there is no use from Stanley Kubrick of projectors. It's just natural light. So here, obviously, this is natural light coming from outside, and it creates this very beautiful lighting. But also because you don't have any other light to help, you only see this section really, and very backlit. You're gonna lose a lot in this section, but you have just enough to see that it's kind of there. It exists, and it's empty, and it's tall, and it's big. And that's the idea of this image here. Here, what we want to see is that they are all grouped around a table in a very empty and big space. So that's why you're going to frame them again relatively low in this line, which is the third. They are pretty much under it. So you have 2/3 up, and they are on the third. So obviously this is going to create this idea of, being very big here. So that insist on the fact that you have a lot of space here and you have a very tall ceiling. And now in terms of lighting, you are not focusing on their faces because you can't see any. Maybe this one a little bit, but you don't have the eyes. And as you know, if you don't have the eyes, you cannot really tell anything. The only person which is looking in our direction is actually this little kid here. So this scene is probably about a discussion between the little kid and the mom, because the others are not really part of the scene. So we stage the scene by putting everything together, and we play the lights to also, really cut them out the rest of the frame and really make them exist just through the light. And then we just focus on what do you see. If you remember the few first images that we looked at, Barry Lyndon, it was already about this notion of negative space, which is exactly what you have here again. So obviously you have a lot of use of negative space here. Like the cloth of the table is white because it's going to contrast with the rest nicely. You have this backlit naturally coming from the window there, which is going to make them bright on something which is going to be dark around, so you're going to see them. So it's like a frame in the frame without using the trick of the whole columns that we had in the first image, but still, like you really feel actually looking at the image as if it was more something like that, because that's pretty much all you see. So you could reframe, and if you put the little boy on the this point, you could reframe and have something working perfectly well. If I crop here, that gives you also a very balanced and very nice image. So the rest is just basically to place this composition into something much bigger and more empty, just to explain how big the room is, so probably how rich they are, and that sort of thing. So that's quite interesting. Obviously, that lets the space for the window, which is the source of light, which is also why it's probably been framed like this, because it's interesting to have the source of light in the image, but you don't have to, and you could totally organize a nice composition around the face of this kid, which is the only element actually looking in our direction. He's the only character really looking at us. So that's quite interesting to check that. Let's move on to another example. Yeah, let's take this image because I think it's a nice image as well, with a lot of story. So if you look at this image, which is a submission to National Geographic, we are going back to the lessons that we've done on the light. And you remember when we had this example on the light, that was the only way to understand the background with the neons. But that's the same here, because obviously nothing happening in this section is visible here. And the only thing that you understand is this light here and this light there. So that creates the space just because you have a bit of light, but literally all this section here is kind of lost. So that insists quite a lot on the idea of this woman being alone under the rain. You have a relatively centered composition here. If I crop again, if I look at that centered composition, I mean, she's nearly in the center. You have this welcome sign pretty much on the third, and this light pretty much on the sun on the third, which is probably the main interest in terms of composition here, because that's really what the artist wanted to do, having one point here and one point there. So creating a composition, but having the main character actually outside of this composition. She's not on any line at all. She's not on any point. So she's lost. And that is pretty much what the story is here. She's a bit lost. She's outside of the frame. She's outside of not the frame, but the composition. And she's under the rain, obviously, going in the section which has a bit of light, but also, you can tell that around her, she's really surrounded by just the darkness. So you have a bit of hopes, but like even this window, with these lines here, that could be like, a grid. It doesn't invite really to get in. And what I find quite amusing is that this element says welcome. So it's really like ironical, because obviously you have welcome, but you're alone, you're lost, you're outside of your composition, you're not in the light. It's raining. Obviously you don't have any car. and you're just gonna try to follow the path and see what you can do. You're really small in the middle of an empty space, so it really insists on the fact that you are a bit lost and weak. So that's quite interesting image here, because you have a lot of things. Color wise, it's also quite nice. You don't have just one color. You're more in the triadic type of approach between the blue and then something between the orange and the yellow and the red. So it's a triadic, or even more like a split complementary type of color palette, and it works really well. Obviously, it feels really well balanced, and I think this is a very nice photograph. Also, we don't really see the face again, so that is why we can tell the story of someone being left alone and a bit lost in a city that she might be discovering for the first time in her life. So another great example, I think, of how to analyze a photo to try to tell a story. And obviously, I wanted to finish with this one that I'm sure everyone knows, but it's such an iconic picture that it's interesting to just go through it and explain why it's been done that way. So obviously, that's the final of Jurassic Park, when the T-Rex enters in the museum and just destroy the skeleton of the previous T-Rex. So obviously, it says that, no, I'm not dead anymore, I'm fully alive. So first of all, that's the meaning of this action, destroying the skeleton, and then be like, I'm here. So it takes pretty much the same pose. And obviously the whole when dinosaurs rule the earth is falling, like, read it, because that's pretty much what's going to happen now. The dinosaurs are ruling the earth now. That's what this T-Rex is thinking of. So now, of the rest of the image itself, what can we say? So first of all, we can say that you have a pile of bone here now, which is a bit like unlikely, because that would not have been falling like this. But basically, it's just to create what he's done. So he's just destroyed everything, and now it's on the floor like a bit of rubbish, and it's just taking the place. What is quite interesting to note is that he cannot fit the frame. Like, his tail is going out, and even his nose is going out, like coming out. It hasn't been framed correctly, or it's probably more to explain that he's so big that we cannot contain him. He's so strong that we cannot contain him. Framing is also a way to control things. It's like putting a frame around something, but you can't, because that's a T-Rex. That's the dinosaur, one of the strongest dinosaur. You cannot control him, and that's what he's trying to say, because obviously he escaped, and now he's killed a few people in the movie. So he's like a wild animal that you cannot control. So you're gonna not be able to frame him correctly in the picture. So you're gonna let him go out. In terms of environments, you are in some sort of very, very oppressive building here. It's full of details. Like you have a lot of small lines everywhere, lots of lines, lots of curves. It feels like he's trying to be in a cage, basically, but he won't stay in the cage. So it's like this dinosaur, the skeleton, was in the cage. It was there in something really small around him, with no access to the light and to the sky and everything. And that's exactly what he wants to show. So he's coming here, he's breaking everything here, living in here on the floor, and now he's gonna escape again. So he's like, I cannot stay in your crate, in your cage. It doesn't fit me. I'm too strong. I am too big. So I'm going to rule the world again, because dinosaurs are back, and I'm going to be able to stay there. Your little house is too small for me. So I'm going to escape. I'm going to go outside. This is the pile of the memory that you had of dinosaurs, but now that is what we have. In terms of colors, obviously blue, orange, red, yellow, if we push the saturation correctly, which is like the Superman type of triadic, blue, yellow, red, and him being more gray, but in this same sort of tone. So you are building, like a triadic, color palette here. So like a classic one, it works really well. Usually it's nice. You have a bit of variation in the blue, but you can roughly say the same. You know, it's a question of saturation here that makes the difference, but globally you're fine. He totally gives us the teeth, the face, and the eyes. So it's like threatening us. It's like he's very powerful. He's really strong. You really look at him straight away. In terms of framing inside, if I put the grid of the third, you can see how that works. So obviously there's a kind of a diagonal here, and his face is not so far away from this point here. It's just that he's moving. So he has been framed on this point here for the rule of third, and then he's following this kind of line, diagonal line, with his body and his tail. Finally, through this window here, or the door here, you see another dinosaur behind, because obviously he's not the only one. So, you know, I'm not the only one. I've got backup. Even if I disappear, now we are here. It's not just one dinosaur which is randomly here. It's actually the whole colony, which is now has now escaped. So that tells you the story of the new domination of the dinosaur on Earth, and that is what this image is telling you through kind of subtle and less subtle tricks. The less subtle being literally putting a banner in front of the spectator, basically saying that the dinosaurs are now ruling the world again, Earth again. So that's kind of fun. And the fact that they destroyed the memory of the dinosaur to just say, no, we are not dead anymore. We are fully back. So that's how you can analyze a picture. So I try to show you how the composition, the use of the colors, the details, the story, the face, the light can help you to tell a story or to understand what the story is meant to be telling you. And that is really something that I want you to remember and focus and try to work on. Like that would be really interesting if you could start to watch at some images, painting, photograph, TV programs, or whatever, by having like conscious of what the directors or the designers are trying to do to achieve, and why are they doing that way. What is the purpose of a specific shot? What is the purpose of a specific color palette? Why using this type of colors and not this type of colors, or why framing that way? Because then it's going to enhance your understanding on how to play with these elements and these tricks and codes to put in your work, because obviously nothing is ever being put here by mistake, or just by luck. It has to be put here for a specific purpose, and the only way to do it correctly obviously is to understand how to manipulate these tricks to achieve the purpose that you want to achieve. So that's it, guys. I just wanted to run through these 6 photos and give you a bit of an analysis of these pictures. And I hope you enjoyed. And if you have any questions, or if you want to submit any other images that we could talk about, just feel free to post them on the forum board. I find this exercise to analyze some pictures really fascinating, because you always have new things to discover. And I'm more than happy to keep playing that with you. So that's it, guys. I'll see you soon for another class for Art 103. Bye-bye.